Sergeant and Mrs. Smith, you're going to love this house.
Is that a tub in the kitchen?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
Are you looking for a view of the world that's a bit different? Hi, I'm Jason Palmer, a host of The Weekend Intelligence, a podcast from The Economist. Join us to hear the stories that matter most to our correspondents and editors. Every Saturday, we introduce you to people and ideas that take you outside the ordinary and expand your horizons one episode at a time. Join us and see the world from a new perspective. To listen free until May 31st, search Spotify for The Weekend Intelligence.
Two guys drove to work. Neither guy wore a seatbelt. One guy got a ticket. One guy didn't. The same two guys drove home. One guy wore his seatbelt. One guy didn't. One guy made it home. The guy not wearing his seatbelt didn't. Don't risk it. Click it or ticket. Paid for by NHTSA.
Hello and welcome to Want to Hear Something Weird, a weekly podcast about weird stuff with normal people. My name's Tom. I'm one of your hosts.
I'm Laura, and I'm one of your other hosts.
Laura, have you brought something weird for our attention today?
Yes.
Okay.
I have, and all I can say is buckle up. It's
okay,
a ride.
I'm coming in completely blind. The listener knows more than I do because they probably saw the title by now.
That is true, and you don't even know that much.
No.
Tom, I'm going to tell you the story about Paul Amadeus Dienach.
Okay. That name sounds a little familiar.
You might. This is a story that's very Tom.
Okay.
So
it's about like a cool guy.
Yeah.
Cool guy doing cool stuff.
Well, so Paul was born in Zurich, Germany, Zurich, Switzerland, in the year 1884.
Okay.
And he studied to become a teacher of languages, focusing on German and French. So this is information that's good to know for the future. He was in love with a girl named Anna.
Okay. Story as old as time.
But family wanted her to marry someone else.
Story even older.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Paul didn't have any money.
No. Yeah. Knowing French and German wasn't enough.
No.
Yeah.
So he's working as a teacher, and one day he fell asleep and wouldn't wake up. So he's taken to the hospital and, by his loved ones. His mother is there, worried sick about what's going on. He essentially slips into a coma.
Okay.
And he remained in that state for about 15 days when he inexplicably woke up again. And it was at this time that he is diagnosed with encephalitis lethargica, which is also known as a sleeping sickness.
Okay.
So I was trying to find if he had actually, if he had been diagnosed at this present moment, or if that kind of
came after the fact.
Kind of came after the fact, because there was the sickness is essentially you slip into comas, or if you have a severe case of it, which is what he had, and there was an epidemic of it going around Europe at the time that affected estimated about 1 million people.
Okay, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, so it was kind of an interesting thing that he was one of the people that it affected, and so then he goes on and lives normally as a teacher for a few years until it happens again, this time in 1921, when he is in a coma for an entire year.
No, now it's going from mild annoyance to inconvenience.
Yes, I'd say so. So he was in a hospital for the full year, and when he emerged from the coma, he learned that his mother had passed away, which is... yeah,
unfortunate.
Really tough news. And
coming out of a coma, you find out you've been in there for a year, and while you were there, you lost your mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, that stinks.
It would really mess you up. And then to make matters worse, he had contracted tuberculosis, likely from his hospital stay.
Yeah, I was going to say probably because he was in the hospital.
So during the time after he woke up again, he was more withdrawn than he used to be, and a lot of people just kind of chalked it up to he's grieving the loss of his mother and trying to, recover from the experience of being in a coma. He essentially was he stayed in, kind of didn't really.
Yeah, and people understandably said, let's give him his space right now.
Yeah. He was an avid reader of books, especially books on philosophy.
Mm.
And after taking some time to recover, he resumed teaching, and this time he decided to move and teach French in Greece.
Okay.
So he's in Greece, and he becomes good friends with a student of his called Georgios Papachatsis.
A Greek fellow.
Georgios.
I'm gonna guess based on that name.
Yes.
Mhm.
And so he spends a few years teaching in Greece and
Teaching French in Greece.
right, teaching French in Greece. And after a few years, when it became evident that he was succumbing to tuberculosis, he decided he wanted to live out his remaining, time on Earth in Switzerland.
Presumably, he had coughed into a handkerchief and pulled it back to see a spot of blood and knew, oh, I'm dying.
I'm dying. That is the only way you ever know.
Right.
Somebody has tuberculosis.
That was the only definitive test they had back then.
Yep. So his buddy Georgios, when Paul decided to move back to Switzerland, he gave Georgios some of his diaries that he had been keeping.
Okay.
And in the diaries, he wrote about what happened while he was in a coma.
What happened while he was in a coma?
Oh boy. What didn't happen?
Okay.
He remembers waking up in a hospital bed.
Okay.
And he didn't have the ability to understand the language that the medical professionals around him were speaking.
Right. The medical jargon, high-tech terms.
Well, no, it was literally a foreign language that he didn't even remember. And, he is a language teacher, so you'd think he would at least
languages, at least recognize it.
Right. Would recognize the language. He said it was like there were vague terms that sounded, Nordic in some way, like maybe Swedish.
Sounds like maybe that language they have in The Sims.
I'm not familiar.
It's called like Simoleon or something, but it just sounds like gibberish. Katy Perry did a song in that language for one of those games.
Nice. Good for her. And so he's not understanding the language they're speaking. He's shown a mirror, and the face looking back at him is not the face of Paul Amadeus Dienach. It is the face of Andreas Northam, who is in the hospital recovering from an accident.
Oh, no.
So what's happening here? Paul is inside the body of another man.
Yeah. That's one of the worst things that can happen if you fall into a coma.
Yeah.
Wake up in the body of another man.
Body. So he naturally loses it and is sobbing and thinking he's either dead or he's completely crazy. And he's saying he's just a teacher from Switzerland. So the doctors ask him what year it is. And he said...
test his cognitive abilities.
Exactly. And he's told... he says it's 1921. And he is told, no, it's actually 3906.
3906? That's a long time in the future.
That's a long time in the future.
No wonder he didn't understand the language they were speaking.
He learns that Andreas, the man whose body he's inside, was in an accident, basically a car accident, but with essentially what he describes as flying vehicles.
Yeah, a flying car accident.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he finds himself surrounded by advanced technology in the hospital and the medical personnel are wearing clothes that he doesn't really recognize. He's realizing this is like a very, place he's not
very
familiar with.
Alien.
Very futuristic. Yes. And then he meets two older men in white robes called illicitors.
Illicitors.
ILLECTORS. These are essentially older wise men. And they determine what's likely happened to him is that he's had a consciousness shift where someone's mind is transferred to someone else.
Right.
And in the accident that Andreas, the man whose body Paul was occupying, was the accident that he was in, he was declared dead for a number of minutes before doctors were able to restart his heart. And that's when they think that the consciousness shift likely happened. So as you'd imagine, Paul has questions.
Right.
He tells the elicitors, they tell him that time is not linear, that everyone's consciousness exists everywhere all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, that kind of explains, or to him,
how it went through time.
how it shifted. Right.
Yeah.
And a close friend.
They're like, that part's normal.
Yeah, that's we know about that.
Yeah, don't worry about that, about being thousands of years in the future. That part we have a firm grip on.
A close friend of Andreas, so Andreas, again, the man whose body he's occupying,
Mm-hmm.
the friend is named Stefan. He was the only person apart from the hospital personnel that knew that it was actually Paul inside Andreas's body. Everyone else would think that it was just Andreas. His personality was a little different.
Right.
But they
Well,
would.
why wouldn't he tell everybody about this?
So the goal was that Stefan would basically help Andreas remember his own identity.
Okay.
And the idea was to sort of pull that out of him, bring that back, and the consciousness shift
Mhm.
would be reversed.
Okay.
And Paul would be sent back to his own time and his own,
So in the
body.
future, they have a very firm grasp of Freaky Friday situations. They know how to reverse them,
Right.
What it will take, and
Exactly.
and just like a Freaky Friday or a what's the one with Jennifer Gardner, 13 going on 30. Like it has to be a secret. Everybody has to be. Yeah,
Well, in
they
13
can't-
going on 30, she's occupying her own body at
right.
30-year-old.
Yeah, but she's keeping it a secret that she's doing
well,
that.
yeah.
She's pretending.
Well, yeah, you
she's,
can't let other people know.
Yeah.
Else,
I forget, in that movie,
Yeah,
did
and
she
she's-
use her knowledge of the future in any way to become rich?
no.
Later on?
She just lived a happy, normal life with Mark Ruffalo
God,
in a nice house.
take a
Nice
peek at a
house.
stock ticker or something while you're in the future, lady. I'm just saying, she could have been set for life.
It was a romance story.
I know, but think about how much, this would have been nice. Anyway, back to Andreas here.
Paul, who was
Paul.
inside of Andreas.
Paul's inside of Andreas, and Andreas's friend Stefan is helping him.
You got it.
Okay.
Paul never slept and never felt tired
All right.
during this time. And he spent a lot of his time learning about history. So, to us, the future. But
Right.
yeah.
Mhm.
And he used it. There was a piece of technology called a Reagan swag that had lights.
A Reagan swan?
A Reagan swag.
Okay. Yeah, sounds futuristic.
There's a lot of, like German
Oh, I see.
type things in this. But essentially what it is like a glorified iPad.
Okay.
It had lights and sounds and the images were 3D and it was sort of like a learning, he used this to read about or learn about history.
His friend Stefan loaded up with an app, with some history app for him.
Yeah.
Paid the monthly subscription.
Yep. Well, you'll learn there's no money in the future.
There's no money in the future.
We'll get to it. So,
Okay.
So what are some of the things that he's learning about in this future? They didn't want him, somehow blocked, he couldn't learn about the 20th century because they didn't want him to be able to go back in time and change things in
his own
lifetime.
Right. So they
start from like the year
become
2000.
a millionaire or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the year 2204,
Okay.
humans colonize Mars. There are eventually become about 20 million people who live on Mars. But in 2265, numbers are hard.
2265. So like 65 years later, approximately.
61, yeah. A natural disaster, natural destruction event wipes out the entire colony.
So natural for Mars.
Natural for Mars.
Yeah.
And never again does humanity try to colonize Mars. So
Yeah.
there goes that.
Probably like an earthquake, maybe a volcano.
Mm-hmm.
Think that kind of stuff happens there. So not volcanoes, but I think they maybe think earthquakes can still happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't.
And who knows what they'll know. Well, I guess in 200 years, they won't know not to make a colony on there.
Yeah. Unless they read this book.
Mm-hmm.
In 2309,
Okay.
there's a nuclear war on Earth that would last about 80 years. And most of humanity would be wiped out at that time.
Wow.
At Outback Steakhouse, your wish is our command. Backed by popular demand, steak and lobster at a special price starting at $19.99. Come enjoy our bold center-cut sirloin seasoned with our signature blend of 17 spices and paired with a buttery, succulent lobster tail. Hurry into Outback Steakhouse where your steak and lobster wishes come true at a price you can't miss. Steak and lobster, starting at $19.99. No rules, just right.
So once the war is over, a new global government is established that is...
How did he know it was a nuclear war?
They said it in the history books.
But I mean, did he say like, oh yeah, they use nukes? Because nukes didn't exist when he was alive.
Yeah, well, he's in the future learning about nukes.
I know, but I'm saying, did he then come back and say, hey, they're going to come up with these things called nukes, right?
In his diary, yeah. Yeah.
Well, how old? Because when was he alive? In the 1800s, right?
In 1921 is when he was in the coma.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So still before the
Before
invention
World War
of,
II. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess they could have just said like massive bombs and.
I don't know. He specifies it's nuclear.
Wow. All right. Well, I guess we got to listen to this guy.
Yeah, he knows the future.
Yeah.
So after about 80 years after the war began, a new global government is established that is designed to end the war.
Right.
And it's not run by politicians or businessmen. It's actually run by scientists, technologists, and humanitarians.
I was going to say usually like the idea of a global government's bad, but it sounds like maybe there aren't that many people left.
It's not immediately good. There's a lot of resistance, and it takes several hundred years for people to actually get on board with this. There's a lot of pushback for a long time. Money as we know it does not exist anymore, and planetary resources are redistributed and are now enough for everyone. So things like overpopulation, climate, nutrition are all solved. But like I said, it took several hundred years after the war to really get this established.
Mm-hmm. No details on how they were able to pull that off that he could glean?
Well, not that I know.
Not that you saw, yeah.
But so I'll get to it, but there's a book. This diary is a book that it's actually on Kindle Unlimited.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In a long time afterward. So now we're jumping to back to 3906. So this is the year when Paul is in the future.
Okay. So
This
is recent history for him now.
Well, this is just kind of giving us some context about what the world is like. Where he is at.
Current events for Paul's.
Yes. So the way that the system is set up, people go to school until they're 17 years old, and then they work for 2 years.
Okay.
And then they retire and just live out the rest of their lives, not having to work anymore.
Okay. Why do they have to work for those 2 years?
Unclear.
Okay.
I mean, I guess it's to put it back into society in some way, and then people decide, if they want to continue to work, it's jobs that are focused on science and art versus jobs that we have now. Like they're jobs that are for enlightening people rather than
but they don't have to do
money
that if they don't want either.
Or they can just live a life of luxury or leisure.
So I guess it's like you're being forced to work for 2 years to see if you like it. See if you like.
I don't know. No. I don't know if it's to see if you like it, or it's just sort of like a mandated thing. Like if you do this, then for the rest of your life you can just chill.
Yeah.
But some people, like, you know, for instance, the people in the hospital that he was at, you know, they wanted to work in, you know, science. And so they pursued that. But not everyone had to do that if it wasn't, you know, they didn't have a calling for it. Yeah.
I'm just going to chill.
Yeah.
Just going to hang out with one of these 3D iPads, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Live out my days just checking out history.
Yeah. And everyone's needs are met. There aren't people like, you know, everyone sort of.
There's no hunger or starvation or I guess those are the same things.
Yeah, there's shelter, you know, everything, you know.
All the basic human rights kind of stuff are taken care of. And then some, probably.
Yes.
People are comfortable.
Right. Which, you know, you'd think a lot of times human nature gets in the way of that kind of a system working.
Yeah.
And why does it work this time? Because humans have evolved.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say they put chips in everybody's heads or something.
No. So in 3382, so this is now jumping. So this is about 600 years before where Paul
is right now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
A phenomenon happens in humans that essentially I'm calling it a sixth sense. That's not what they've called it, but it is what it is. Essentially, they have a new sense that allows them to perceive a plane of existence that we currently cannot perceive.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And they have access to spiritual knowledge through new cognitive abilities.
Mm.
So, and what that gives them is sort of this instantaneous enlightenment.
All right.
So they're very enlightened. They're really like humans in our current world are hardwired for survival.
Mm-hmm.
And even, we'll do what it takes to survive, even if it's at the expense of others. Whereas this new kind of species of humans are wired for, cooperation for the greater good. And that the idea of the things that people do to each other now just like isn't something that they can even really like even conceive of ever doing themselves.
Okay.
So it sounds nice.
Yeah. All it takes is humans evolving into a different species.
Yeah.
Like the X-Men.
Yeah. He's on this sort of like journey. He spends his days reading. He can't sleep at night. He just kind of sits up, looks at the city.
That's understandable. I think if I got thrown like 2,000 years into the future or more.
You just want to learn about
I don't think I'd be able to like sleep. Yeah, I think I'd be just constantly trying to learn everything.
In his case, he wasn't even tired.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so he is sort of living the life of leisure.
Mm-hmm.
When he first kind of went out into this world and was associating with people, other friends, the Stefan friend of Andreas introduced him to other friends, and everyone's just kind of just hanging out.
By the way, just imagining as Bill Hader's character Stefan.
And well, I think this should be a TV series, and Bill Hader should be in it. But he's going out, he's sort of socializing, and he's seeing, how people are living. They're not working. He's thinking, oh, these must all be like rich people. They're taking vacations all the time. They're just hanging out.
Nobody goes to vaudeville anymore.
What?
Well, he's from like the 20s, right?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Who knows what kind of entertainment
It's like, oh my God, woke culture's run amok in the year almost 4,000 here.
I mean, it definitely is.
Yeah, I mean, he would have been, I would imagine, really blown away by a lot of things he would be seeing. But I guess at this point, it's like society's collapsed at least one or two times. So once he learns about this, the way the system works, that people don't have to work if they don't want to, he's like, oh, okay. So he is just spending his time reading, hanging out. He's up all night just kind of looking at the city lights and watching movies,
hanging out.
Yeah.
And he meets a woman.
Oh, a future woman. Well, not to her, just a regular present day woman as far as she's concerned. But
she, we don't know very much about her except that they basically begin and develop a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so, do you remember Anna from the beginning of the episode? Yes. Who he was in love with as a young man?
Mm.
So, the last time that Paul saw Anna was they were sitting in a field, just spent the day together. We're sitting in the field in their hometown, and it was a field of flowers, and Paul knew that it was going to be the last day that he was going to be able to be with her because she was going to be, sent off to be married or whatever happened in those times. And he didn't want the day to end, but eventually Anna said, let's call it a day.
Yeah.
And Paul said to her, promise me that we'll see each other again.
Mm-hmm.
And Anna promised and said that she'd make a wreath out of the flowers that they were in the field. We'll meet back here. I'll make a wreath out of these flowers for you the next time we're here. Well, Paul didn't ever see her again.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he is in the future, he develops this relationship with this futuristic woman who's technically a different species of human.
Right.
And they decide to take a day trip, and there were these cars, flying cars that could really take you anywhere on the globe in an instant.
Yeah.
And he wanted to go back to his hometown, but he didn't really let her know about that.
Mm-hmm.
He just said, let's go to this place in, Switzerland. It's very beautiful. And so he takes her to the field there's beautiful flowers. They're sitting in the field, and she begins to make a wreath out of the flowers. And, just like Anna said that she would. And Paul it has this moment of realizing this is reincarnation now that he has that instantaneous enlightenment, or he knows about this enlightenment, and he knows about, that consciousness exists at all times. Everyone's, consciousness. And he's realizing, this is reincarnation. And that experience, finally, he felt sleepy for the first time since he'd been there in the future. And he's recognizing this feeling of being tired and sleepy as like a nice feeling, a good feeling, and he falls asleep. And when he woke up, back in 1922.
Yeah, and everything sucked.
Humans were horrible to each other, and some of the worst atrocities of humankind were still found.
Everything was filthy, and you could die of dumb shit real easy.
So Paul writes all of this down in his diaries. And he writes it in French. And his friend, when he's if you remember, the friend that he made, Georgios, the Greek guy, while he was in Greece teaching, sits down and translates the diaries into Greek, and eventually gets the books, or has the diaries published into books in the 1970s. It takes him a long time. Georgios ends up becoming a pretty respected person who worked in government in his own right, and there was definitely some pushback about the publication, because Georgios wasn't the actual author.
Yeah.
There was also, the content of the book, I think it was the Catholic Church wasn't thrilled about that. But
that sounds like them.
Yeah. But it was published, and it is called Chronicles from the Future, The Amazing Story of Paul Amadeus Dienach. And so, like I said, it's apparently on Kindle Unlimited now. But there's been, as you can imagine, a lot of suspicion around the story.
Really? People didn't just take it at face value?
Some people think it is kind of a nice found footage type of story of, these are the diaries of a guy who was in a coma, but it's really a work of complete fiction. It's a novel.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, even if it was just, this guy was in a coma, he had this insane, year-long dream inside his coma, wrote it down, didn't tell anyone because he wasn't sure if it was real or not. And then his friend finds it and publishes it. That's very interesting. But I'm guessing there's suspicion if that's even the case.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So there's suspicion about the authenticity of Paul Amadeus Dienach even being a real person. Apparently, it's very difficult to find any record of him.
Right.
I think that there's some, claims that he had to relocate at a certain point during World War I, and that he had to change his name, and that's why there's no record of him under that name. There's a when you Google, if you were to Google his name, there's an image that comes up, and he's, claiming to be Paul, or this image is claiming to be Paul. He's a very handsome man, if you don't mind me saying so.
I do. Okay, yeah.
Nice mustache. And this is actually the headshot of a criminal from New Zealand. How it got associated with Paul, unclear, but this is it's everywhere on the internet.
Yeah.
If you were to look him up, it's not him at all. So obviously there's a lot of the only record we have of any of this happening of these diaries that he allegedly wrote and that his friend had published. But there's also some people think that it wasn't ever meant to be published as truth, that it was published as a novel, that it was supposed to be fiction, and people just kind of misconstrued it and took it as truth. And of course there's translations and things kind of get lost, so there could be
it's like a Blair Witch type thing, but then people thought it was real, right? Yeah. Apparently
there's also a Lovecraft book. It's a similar, at least, plot device where there is a guy who slips into a coma and travels through time. So
could just be straight up plagiarism.
In that book, apparently he goes back in time, not into the future.
Well, yeah, it's easier. You can predict what happened in the past.
Yeah. But it is, and because of a lot of the themes that are touched on in the book about, humanity and what people do to one another and how to really be enlightened and find a better solution to how people should live. It's nice, and there's definitely a lot of philosophy in the book. So people think that there's kind of this was a novel that was really written as a, to touch on those themes.
Yeah,
but
and this could be what we were like if we were nice to each other.
But that it isn't actually something that happened. Yeah. Or there's the other, like you said, that it could have just been a guy who did have a coma and that wrote this stuff, his dreams down. And because there are stories of people who've been in comas that have had these very elaborate dreams that feel very real to them. So could be that also. We don't really know.
Yeah, I guess we won't for a few thousand more years.
Yeah, just wait till about 3,300 and then we'll know.
We'll be back with
truth.
A special episode to confirm or deny it.
Just don't move to a colony on Mars. I think that's going to be your best.
Yeah. Well, once that happens, then that's going to be uh-oh. Yeah. This stuff looks like it might be coming true. Well, I mean, either way, it's a fascinating story. If it's made up or if it's not. I mean, even if it's made up, that's pretty cool sci-fi for somebody to come up with 100 years ago.
That's what I'm saying. I think it would be cool as a series.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe I'll option it.
Okay. Great.
That's all for this week on Want to Hear Something Weird. If you like the show, why not give us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify? That helps new shows. You can also email us, wannahearpod@gmail.com. If you've got any creepy stories, you can send us a voicemail there too. And also check out speakpipe.com/wannahearpod, where you can record a voicemail. And you can also follow us on social media @wannahearpod.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next week.
Want to Hear Something Weird is a Clamor audio production, distributed by the Cloud 10 Network. Hosted and executive produced by Tom Reynolds and me, Laura Anderson. Executive produced by Aaron Hilliard.
Clamor General Manager Rich Statter. Associate Producer Ethan Aronson. Post-production supervised by Devin Ruskin. Production Assistant Samara Mullick. Special thanks to Sim Sarna and Saiba Krieger at Cloud 10.
Seeking the truth never gets old. Introducing June's Journey, the free-to-play mobile game that will immerse you in a thrilling murder mystery. Join June Parker as she uncovers hidden objects and clues to solve her sister's death in a beautifully illustrated world set in the Roaring '20s. With new chapters added every week, the excitement never ends. Download June's Journey now on your Android or iOS device or play on PC through Facebook Games.